All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mikey. You've now arrived at my train of thought. It's time to talk about Week 15. So many things happened. Some teams' playoff hopes were amplified. Some teams' playoff hopes were crushed. Let's talk about two of them right now. So, this was not the offensive showdown that we thought this was going to be based off of the previous week's events, when the Niners couldn't be stopped by the Bears and the Rams couldn't be stopped by the Bills. Instead, both defenses did their part, and Mother Nature to an extent. Brock Purdy was pretty rough, although he did get kind of screwed over by Deebo Samuel, who complained about not getting the ball and then dropped the golden opportunity for a touchdown when he had a chance to catch the ball. Not a good look, Deebo Samuel. Anyway, what was also a bad look was Devondre Campbell quitting on the Niners. Awful look there, and I think he got rightfully cooked by a lot of the fraternity that is NFL players. There was exactly one good throw that was caught by the team and a player on the team that actually threw it. It was the Stafford throw to Puka Nacua, which set up a Rams field goal, but that's about it. Other than that, it was a defensive show and an offensive no-show for the most part by both teams. Rams take your win and run. Niners, this is effectively the end of your season, I would think. So, Carolina probably shouldn't have been favored, and unfortunately, I think a lot of us realized it too late. Dallas showed up, showed out, and balled out for a lot of this game. Rico Dowdle handled business. Cooper Rush was productive and efficient. This was a relatively easy win for the Cowboys, and a team that has suddenly gained a little bit of momentum by doing what they're supposed to do, generally beating up on bad teams. If only Mario Warrior had handled that muffed block kick, then maybe Dallas would have won 4 straight and have an actual decent shot at making the playoffs. But now it's just an outside one, and for Carolina, just 3 more games, and you can kind of rebuild your offensive line or get a wide receiver and help out Bryce Young to some degree. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this massacre that Baltimore inflicted on the Giants. There's really not much you can really say. Lamar was excellent. The Giants were the Giants. And Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, it did not matter who was the quarterback. They got slaughtered. There's not much here. Baltimore just did what good teams are supposed to do to bad ones and just wiped them off the face of the earth. Good. Baltimore did not fail the assignment. Neither did the Giants, for that matter. Get 3 more games from Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Giants, choose wisely. Baltimore, did you gain ground on the Steelers? We'll find out in a little bit. So, is Aaron Rodgers trying to convince the Jets and Jets fans that he should be the guy for the 2025 season? Will the Jets or Jets fans, or will the Jets front office, whoever will be in it, will they fall for that? Will they say, hey, he played well in December. We could have him around for 25. This was another really good game in the state of Florida by Aaron Rodgers. And this time it was against the Jaguars team, who is really bad. And if ever this were a public service announcement for them to draft Will Johnson or hope and pray that Travis Hunter falls to them, this is it. Because, yikes, Devontae Adams shredded everyone in that secondary. It didn't matter who or what was trying to guard him, because apparently there were some ghosts trying to guard him, and even they couldn't stop him. 9 for $198 and 2 tugs in the second half. Great dominance by Adams. And even then, probably the only reason why the Jets didn't blow this is because Mac Jones was on the opposite side. And Mac Jones, being Mac Jones, threw a duck to Sauce Gardner, and Sauce didn't miss. The Jets get a win that will probably hurt their tanking. The Jaguars get a loss that will help it. Jaguars, pray that Travis Hunter or Will Johnson falls to you. Mason Graham would also be an acceptable choice. So, remember when Tua said that he couldn't wait to kill narratives? Yeah, this is what we would like to call a very freezing cold take. Unfortunately for Tua, this was the first game since he said that where he was awful. And it happened to be at the time where Miami needed him to play at his best. He did not. Now, 2 of the 4 turnovers that he had were not his fault, I would say. The fumble was not on him. He had no shot. That was a blindsided attack from Will Anderson, and Tua had no chance to prepare for it because Jackson Carman had no idea what he was doing. The last ditto was also not his fault. That's Tyreek Hill, who's a $30 million receiver. He's got to catch it. He had the ball in his hands and had it taken away from him, albeit by a great player, Derek Stingley. The two minnows in between, absolutely on Tua. You cannot throw those passes. He's trying to force feed Tyreek Hill in all three cases where he threw interceptions. And the first two were just not good throws. And the players in the secondary of the Texans were able to read to his eyes. And it was easy. Fait accompli. And those mistakes took points off the board for the Dolphins or enabled the Texans to get to points. The fumble and the first especially. Plus the long return off the fake punt that they apparently prepared for and failed to actually execute their preparation on. The Texans were able to capitalize off of Miami's mistakes and self-destruction. They weren't all that great either because the Miami defense showed up and actually played well. Unfortunately, it didn't matter because Miami made so many mistakes on offense. The Texans have a chance to clinch their division. I'll talk about whether they did in a moment. For the Dolphins, this is a season that could have been if there were health, if there were less self-destruction, if there were more efficiency. I'll try not to spend too much time on this game either with Cincinnati and Tennessee because there's not much else to say here. Tennessee's bad. Will Levis threw a bunch of innos, and pick six happened. It was not great. For the Bengals, okay, it wasn't the barrage that you would expect, but it was still a lot of points, which is not bad. Joe Burrow was efficient and Ja'Marr Chase was solid. Not spectacular on both ends, but efficient and solid. And for Tennessee, this is a wake-up call of you need your quarterback next year ASAP. The real question is it from the draft or is it from free agency? It's certainly not on this roster. For Cincinnati, like Miami, your playoff hopes are very faint. You need a lot to go right to get in. We're going to stay in Ohio and go to the Browns. And they have no shot at making the playoffs. They've already been eliminated from them. Okay, fine. Myles Garrett, unfortunately, getting his eye poked was not great. The Jameis Winston experience might be over because even more turnovers happened. More self-destruction from the Browns, some of it on special teams. And Kansas City got a relatively easy win. There was no devil magic. There were no shenanigans. It was just a relatively easy win. Not much really to say here. Except for the whole Pat Mahomes having a high ankle sprain thing. That's kind of important. And the real question will be, now that Kansas City is about to go through a gauntlet in terms of the 3 games they've got left against playoff caliber teams and the time of which to have the games. What will Kansas City do? Will they play the long range game and keep Mahomes healthy? Or will they go for broke, try to get the first overall seed, and then get him a rest? We'll see what Kansas City does. I'll be talking about their game later today. For Washington and the Saints, this game shouldn't have happened this way. It shouldn't have been all that close considering how well Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin continued to play. It shouldn't have been all that close considering all the bodies that New Orleans does not have on offense. It should not have been this close. And yet it was. And yet somehow it was New Orleans having golden opportunity to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. They did the right thing by going for 2. And they're doing a lot of this, I should say, without Alvin Kamara, who got hurt during this game. That's kind of impressive by New Orleans to make the comeback the way they did. And yet, this probably should have been a win for the Saints. If New Orleans, unfortunately, they ran the same play, it looked like, for the touchdown to Foster Moreau, and tried to do it again with Jawan Johnson on the 2. Commanders just happened to get there. Unfortunate on their part. And it makes what was a valiant comeback a loss as opposed to it could have been a win. Washington take the win and run. New Orleans, please rebuild. Please rebuild. You're going to have to blow this up. I think you should. So I'll try not to spend too much time on this game either. Not much really happened out of the ordinary. It was the Cardinals playing relatively well. It was the Patriots playing their part as doormats. It was a relatively easy win for Arizona, a team that needs to bounce back and try to stay in this playoff race. For the Patriots, you're a few games away from trying to rebuild your offense. You've got somebody in Drake May that looks promising. Do not squander him. Offensive linemen and wide receivers are very needed. For the Cardinals, you got some hay to make for the last few games of your season. Well, will they be the last few games of your regular season, or will they be playoff games? How much time do you have left? So, I talked about Tua's struggles, and the guy picked after him, Justin Herbert, in big games. Also not great. Unlike Tua, this game was at home. And unlike Tua, these offensive line's generally healthy, and the Chargers were rolling into this game, you would say. And then the game starts, and the Chargers get out to a decent lead, and then Baker Mayfield says that's enough of that. And Baker Mayfield absolutely destroyed what was a really good Charger defense going into this game. Mike Evans also did his thing. Will Mike Evans get to 1,000 yards? We will see. But anyway, Justin Herbert, when the Chargers absolutely needed him to make some moves and make some things happen, he could not. And those were thrown. Game was lost. This was a bloodbath by Tampa Bay. And for Tampa, they made their layups the last couple of weeks, and then they made a really hard shot this week. Tampa Bay is going to be back to making layups, one would think, next week. Who would have thought that this game between the Colts and Broncos would turn on one simple event? Jonathan Taylor looks like he's going to run to the crib. The Colts are about to go up by 2 scores. It's looking real good for Indianapolis. And then Jonathan Taylor drops the ball at the 1, and it's a touchback. Sure, Denver didn't do anything after that. They went 3 and out immediately. But it just never felt like the Colts could regain the momentum that they would have had Jonathan Taylor scored. That's alarming and that's concerning. The interception throw by Donnie Mitchell, and I'm going to call it a pick 6 by Nick Bonito, was also not very good. And the Colts were kind of crumbling as the game went on after the Taylor fumble. But it just felt like, had Taylor scored, I'm not sure Denver comes back from this. Not the way Bo Nix was playing. Bo Nix was not good in that game at all. But he got a reprieve because of the disaster that Taylor had and the destruction that the Colts caused themselves throughout the game. Anthony Richardson was not good either in this particular battle. And the Broncos basically capitalized on Indy's mistakes and made it happen. Denver looks like they're going to make the playoffs for the first time since 2016. And they just need one more win to do it. Will they get it? I will talk about it later today. And now we get to the double main event portion of the video. And let's talk about the Battle of Pennsylvania first. To be honest, this should have been way worse than the final score actually was. Of course, Jalen Hurts got A.J. Brown the ball early and often early on. And he got the touchdown to start the proceedings. And, of course, the Eagles defense came to play and showed up and showed out. We should also say that it was also an obvious thing that T.J. Watt would force a turnover. Of course he did. And the Steelers defense would do their part early, because of course they did. But the Eagles just felt like the vastly superior team because they were able to ball control and punish the Steelers. They kind of bullied Pittsburgh, and that's saying something, because Pittsburgh doesn't really allow that. And it felt like the Steelers never really had the ball in the second half where it could do anything. Again, because of the Eagles' mistakes early on with fumbles, this score is kind of deceiving to me. It felt like the Eagles, had they not made mistakes early, probably would have won by 3 or 4 scores. It's just the way they were playing. That's how good the Eagles look right now. 10 straight wins. And for Pittsburgh, you're going to be fine. You've obviously clinched the playoff spot based off earlier events. It's just a matter of where you will be seated. You'll be fighting for the 2 seed with these guys in the form of the Bills, who have literally really not been stopped for a lot of the last 2 weeks. Maybe once or twice, and one of them was a block punt returned to the crib by the Rams, but they have truly not been stopped for the last 2 weeks for the most part. Josh Allen is in God mode, and that's terrifying for a lot of defenders. He's had to be these last couple weeks because the defense could not get stops over this time span. In this case in Detroit, I think they took one too many risks having an onside kick early in the 4th. They could have tried to play defense, even though Dan Campbell's reasoning is sound. It just felt like a decision that he did not have to make. Detroit just has way too many injuries on defense, so I get it, but yikes, it's just not great to take that kind of risk. Anyway, Jared Goff had another masterful game. Nearly 500 yards and 4 tugs. He was excellent. He was outstanding even. Unfortunately, he was the second best quarterback on the field. And because Josh Allen is like that, he might have just won MVP with 3 games to go. Detroit, you still have control of the 1 seed. Unfortunately, I don't know if you have enough bodies to keep the 1 seed away from Minnesota or the Eagles. For Buffalo, you still need a little bit of help. You may get it. We'll see what happens with Mahomes and the Chiefs, because they got a 2-game cushion now after your loss to the Rams. Will Buffalo be able to host every round of the playoffs that they're in? We'll see. Green Bay then went to their House of Doom on Sunday Night Football, and they proved that it may not be their House of Doom anymore. They went through stomping, and they went through giving out beatdowns to a Seattle team that was looking relatively decent. They did not look or show themselves at all in this manner. That pass rush from the Packers absolutely destroyed Geno Smith and got him injured. And then we got Sam Howell, who basically suffered the same fate in terms of a beating. Not the injury part, though. We saw Josh Jacobs handle business, and we saw what the Packers' offense could be if Jacobs is able to get rolling. And they continue to be bully ball and bully Seattle all night long. Great catches by Jalen Reed. We'll see what happens if Romeo Doubs can return. And if so, if he's back to full health, the Packers are back to full strength in terms of having 4 real pass targets that you have to cover on every play, not to mention Jacobs. Green Bay is looking real good right now to try to get the 5 seed. They play Minnesota coming up. We'll see what they can do with it. As for Seattle, you still got control of the NFC West. It's just a matter of whether you keep it or not. So Chicago has still not recovered from the Hail Mary, and this has continued. Their offense looked ineffective and efficient against Minnesota. To be fair, the Vikings defense is like that, but once again, they just didn't look all that great for a lot of this game. And for the Vikings, it never felt like they were going to lose this game. I never really had any sort of doubts or concerns about the Vikings' abilities to win, just because A, they're the better team, and B, sans Darnold Inno, they didn't make too many terrible decisions. This was a relatively straightforward win for the Vikings. There was really no excitement for the Bears to try to beat them. It was just a generally good, easy win for Minnesota. And now Minnesota is in a spot where you win out, you don't have to leave Minneapolis until the Super Bowl if you're good enough to get there. And considering what the Lions situation is in terms of their health, it is in play that the Vikings win out. It's fair to say that the Falcons-Raiders game was a giant mess. How would I say this? It's easy. Neither quarterback really got anything going. Both quarterbacks were hit a lot because the offensive lines did not hold up. I'm disappointed in the Falcons for their part of that. The offenses could not move the ball very well, with exception to a couple of plays from the Falcons early on. And this game really got nowhere fast, and slowly and surely, it felt like the Falcons were just going to pull away, and we're not going to have to talk about this too much. But then a funny thing happened. The Raiders' offense kind of sort of got going at the end. It's kind of weird to say, but it's the truth. It kind of got going towards the end. It was looking like they were going to actually steal this game and make the Falcons all-time Falcon on a Monday night. Fortunately, the Falcons thought better of it and said, we will not Falcon this. And a Hail Mary at the end of the game was caught by Jessie Bates, who happens to play for Atlanta. So it's the second Monday night game this year where he ends it with an NO and saves Atlanta from hilarious embarrassment. Atlanta made their layup, barely. You still need a little bit of help to win the NFC South because of how you botched the last month. And after previous events, it'll be up to Michael Penix to get him that help because Icy Kirk got benched. He's going to now watch the 8th overall pick from this past draft, see if he can do his thing. Is Mike Penix up to the challenge? We shall see. So, I was up to the challenge in terms of my picks this past week. I went 13-3, and my overall record is 153-72 through 15 weeks. Coming up later today, Power Rankings. What will be the theme? Where do the Detroit Lions fall after the injuries and their actual loss to the Bills? Can the Eagles get to the number one spot in my rankings? Who's going to be at the bottom? You're going to have to tune in to find out about that and where will be the first stop of my next train of thought.